together. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya
Jaya Gaura
Jaya Jaya Shri
Jaya Shri
Chaitanya
Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda
Jaya Dvaita
Advaita
Chandra
Chandra
Jaya
Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So, perhaps Padmanama, Prabhu, if you could just put everyone on mute.
Yeah, sure, Prabhu.
Yeah. And then what at certain points I will ask the questions then or any comments, then you're quite welcome to unmute yourself and you can make a comment or ask a question. Like that. So again, this is, you can follow along if you like, if you have a copy of Caitanya-Cartimanrita, Madhya chapter 21. Now this comes, this chapter is comes in Sanatana Shiksha. So this is Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teaching to Sanatana Goswami. And if you read that chapter, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu goes into great detail, discussing many topics, and specifically he speaks about the different incarnations and the different manifestations of the Lord. So if you do want to study that subject, it's a good place to go. Now, within this discussion, Sanatana Shiksha, these discussions to Sanatana Goswami, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu becomes particularly inspired. Well, he is inspired anyway, especially about topics of Krishna Katha. And as you notice, the title of the chapter is very instructive in one sense. It's called the Opulence of Krishna. So this is Krishna's Aishvarya Gyan, which is essential for everyone to thoroughly understand before he might start understanding more the fine details of Krishna's pastimes. But also then it describes the opulences and the beauty of Krishna. So it goes from the approach of Aishvarya, inspiring a sense of awe and reverence towards Krishna. And as we go through, you hear that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu becomes inspired and emanated, and he begins to describe directly about Krishna. And at the end of the chapter, he admits that he wasn't supposed to speak in that manner. That wasn't his idea, or he wasn't specifically at that time speaking this subject to Sanatana Goswami, but his bhava or his ecstasies overtook him. So this is what the chapter basically consists of. So we'll be trying as best as possible to follow the mood of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in our own humble way. And so he begins the chapter. This is, I'm just picking it up here from the beginning if you're following. He begins, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu just carrying on from his instructions to Sanatana Goswami about the different incarnations. And he begins to describe the dimension of the Vaikuntha planets. Basically in text 3, he explains to Sanatana Goswami that the transcendental forms of the Lord, they're situated everywhere. So he's been describing the different incarnations of Krishna. And then he goes on to describe how they preside over the whole of creation in all the different planets. And he begins to speak about the Vaikuntha planet specifically. And he's describing that there's no counting these planets. They are unlimited. And if you see here, he begins to give us an idea by this. You see here, 8 times 100. He mentions 8 times 100 times 1,000 times 10,000 times 100,000 and times 10 million. Now that comes to a number that even the calculator can't come up with. So we have this 8e to the power of 21. how to, if anyone knows how to pronounce that number, you can please let me know. But it's unlimited. So I found this very inspiring, specifically because when we understand or begin to try and appreciate specifically the Vaikuntha planets, even this material world, then it kind of highlights our insignificance. So sometimes it's good to take shelter of our insignificance. What to speak of these Vaikuntha planets, what to speak of our little world in our little dimension that we live in. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is speaking to Sanatana Goswami, and he mentions that each of these Vaikuntha planets, which is very large, how large is inconceivable. It describes that they're made of spiritual bliss. So they're all part of the internal energy of the Lord as opposed to the external energy. And all the inhabitants there, they all have these full opulences, just like Krishna himself. So we're speaking about Vaikuntha at the present. And these Vaikuntha planets are all situated in the spiritual sky, and they're situated in a certain corner of the spiritual sky. So we just reflect how we've come up with this number 8.8E21, an unlimited number of planets, of Vaikuntha planets, but they're situated in the corner of the spiritual sky. So how can we, Lord Chaitanya explains, how can we measure the spiritual sky? We can't even measure the material sky. As we know, the scientists remain baffled in trying to understand the dimension and the scope of this material world with their limited senses. So the Vaikuntha realm, trying to understand the dimension and the scope. Hare Krishna, someone's on mute. I've just, Hare Krishna. So trying to comprehend, so all these planets, all the Vaikuntha planets, amazingly, they're situated in just one corner of the spiritual sky. And then there's a description is given to Sanatana Goswami. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu describes that it's compared to a lotus flower. You may have heard this. This is also described in the Brahma Samhita. Lord Brahma describes to some extent as compared to a lotus flower. Now the topmost part of that, I'm just paraphrasing now from text 7. This is the whirl. You can see the picture of the lotus there, and in the middle there's a golden part. So picture the petals are the Vaikuntha planets, which happens to be one in just one corner. Of course, it's difficult for us to see, or imagine this, because from this picture it looks like the petals are bigger than the whirl. Okay, so just keep that in mind, that the whirl is actually bigger than the petals. And what is that whirl? That is Krishna's personal home, so to speak. That is Krishna's abode. And the spiritual and the petals of this spiritual lotus consist of the many Vaikuntha planets. So within that, then there's a world which is Krishna's own abode. And then Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu goes back and he begins explaining about the Vaikuntha planets. They're full of spiritual bliss and complete opulence and space. So as you know, I live in a small temple in central London, and one opulence we don't have is space. But that's not like, oh, perhaps you have your own flat or house. But Vaikuntha is characterized by complete opulence and space. And each Vaikuntha planet is inhabited by an incarnation. And then Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu describes even Lord Brahma. Now, Lord Brahma is is a very intelligent person. He's the engineer of the universes, empowered by Krishna, Hridaye, from within the heart. And Lord Shiva, powerful representation of Krishna. They cannot estimate the length and breadth of the spiritual sky and the Vaikuntha planet. So what to speak of us, what to speak of ordinary living entities? And Lord Chaitanya describes, even trying to imagine it is not possible. There's one devotee mentioned when we were describing this, he was giving class and he made an interesting point about the unlimited scope of the Vaikunthas, or even you could say the material universe, is that if we come up with a certain number, that means it's nowhere near because it's incalculable. So now I'll just read here directly from text 9. O Supreme Great One, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, O Super Soul, Master of all mystic power, your pastimes are taking place continuously in these worlds, but who can estimate where, how, and when you are employing your spiritual energy and performing your pastimes? No one can understand the mystery of these activities. So the Lord's pastimes are going on continually, and these different incarnations and manifestations. As we know, Krishna's pastime, for example, of speaking Bhagavad Gita, that is a Nitya lila. That is going on eternally. And all the other Krishna's pastimes, Damodar lila, Prabhupada would describe it, it's just like the sun. From our perspective, it seems to be setting, but it's not. It's from our limited perspective. The sun is always exhibiting its power and glory. So in the same way, Krishna's pastimes become manifest in one universe, then they become apokrat, they become unmanifest, and then manifest in another universe. So again, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, remember, he's describing presently the opulence, the inconceivable opulence of Krishna, of the Supreme Lord. And he goes further. He describes, so that was just the manifestation and the Shakti of Krishna. Say just, but then he describes that the spiritual qualities of Krishna are also unlimited. So if you read Nectar of Devotion, you know that Rupa Goswami gives 64 qualities there. And he possesses each of them to an unlimited degree. So sometimes it's misunderstood, perhaps not misunderstood, but when we first read, we might think Krishna only has 64 opulences. No, he has unlimited opulences. So they are unlimited, just like we describe the number of Vaikuntha planets here. The actual qualities of Krishna are unlimited. And as Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu describes later, this is what devotees should be absorbed in Krishna's in his opulence and his unlimited opulences and qualities. So he describes that even Brahma, again he mentions Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva, and even the Kumaras, they cannot estimate the spiritual qualities of the Lord. And some of you might be aware of this quote here. He describes in time, great scientists, even if they can count all the atoms of the universe, all the stars and planets, and all the particles of snow, in other places described even the grains of sand. So who could understand? Even then, they could never understand the unlimited qualities of Krishna. And then Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu goes into Pacific from this point. He becomes enamored by it, not enamored is the right word, but it becomes very much captured. Of course, he is Krishna, but he's playing a role as a devotee, so he's speaking in that vein. So he describes that that person who has unlimited qualities and possesses unlimited opulence, he descends to the surface of the earth. Why? For our benefit, for the benefit of all living entities. So sometimes there's a philosophy, I forget the name of it, I think, but in the early 19th century, there's a philosophy describing that, yes, the Lord created the world, but now he is impotent. Now he has no jurisdiction. He is just a creator, and it's going on its own course. He is the original creator, but he has nothing specifically to do. Of course, we understand different from Bhagavad Gita, Maya Takshena Prakriti. The Lord is fully in control of every atom. And so that person who has unlimited qualities, he descends on this earth. And he says again, he's quoting Lord Brahma, where he says, to say nothing of Lord Brahma, even Lord Ananta. So he has thousands of hoods, and described he's always continuously preaching the glories of the Lord, reciting his pastimes. And he cannot come to an end. And he's been chanting these pastimes for eternity. So we can understand that if we understand the Lord's qualities are unlimited and his opulences are unlimited. So Ananta Shesh, that's his Nitya Sheva, that's his eternal pastime, as well as holding up all the worlds. He's continuously glorifying Krishna. Satata Kirtayanto Mam Vitantascha Duravrita Namasam Chastamam Bhakta Nitya Yukta Upasate. So this is the eternal occupation of a devotee, Nitya Yukta Upasate. To always speak about and always meditate upon the unlimited qualities and pastimes of Krishna. So if there's any comments or questions or any reflections on what I've said, please feel free. Sorry about that, forgot to turn my phone off, but please, if there's anything, you can unmute and ask a question if you want. If not, I'll continue. Okay.
Sorry, I did want to, Hare Krishna.
Yes. If you just tell me your name.
Okay, my name is Darshana.
Hare Krishna Darshana. Yes, thank you, please.
It's a wonderful talk already. So thank you. But I wanted to ask you, why has Krishna made so many planets and universes and so many people everywhere?
Good question. Why has Krishna made so many universes and so many people everywhere? Well, he's the king of, you could say, the king of rasa, or the king of enjoyment. So interestingly, Krishna creates us so we can, in our original state, we can render loving devotional service to him. So Krishna, in that sense, he has unlimited manifestations. Now, when we speak on this subject, it's to be understood that we are eternal. So there was, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, there was never a time when we did not exist. So we are eternal. There was never a point when Krishna created us as such. We are eternal. But the point of your question, why is there so many living entities? Because Krishna wants to, or he enjoys loving exchanges. So he has so many living entities. I don't know if that answers your question. Even we were speaking the other day, even we might say, yeah, but what about the plight of conditioned souls, those who have turned away from Krishna, so to speak, and entered into Devidam, entered into the material world. Why is that taking place? Well, that's also part of Krishna's opulence, so he can manifest his nature of compassion and rescue living entities and provide facility for them to again be reinstated. So I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah,
Basically, the answer is because that's Krishna's sweet will.
right.
Exchange unlimited, have unlimited enjoyment of exchanges of devotion.
No, thank you. That does answer my question. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Okay, thank you. Padmanabha Nityanandapu, I hope perhaps you could, if you can record this, if you're not doing already, because often people like to get a copy of it if they've missed it. So just mention that. Okay, so we're continuing if you're following in the CC. This reading now, looking at text 14. Again, we're speaking at Lord Anantadev. He cannot find an end to preaching the glories of Krishna. And then there's a verse here. I'll just quote. This is from text 15. My Lord, you are unlimited. Even the predominating deities of the higher planetary systems, including Lord Brahma, cannot find your limitations. And I found this point interesting. Nor can you yourself ascertain the limit of your qualities. So that's very intriguing. Krishna knows everything. Krishna is omnipotent and Krishna is omnipresent. But his potencies are always expanding. And then Krishna himself expands in his appreciation of his own opulences and qualities. And so it goes on. So even Krishna cannot ascertain the limits of his qualities. What to speak of us? So the verse continues, like atoms in the sky, there are multi-universes with 7 coverings, and these are rotating in due course of time. All the experts in Vedic understanding are searching for you by eliminating the material elements. In this way, searching and searching, they come to the conclusion that everything is complete in you. You are the result of everything. This is the conclusion of all Vedic experts. Now, this is a verse by the prayers personified. Just read there in the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And interesting, in this chapter, Prabhupada doesn't give so many elaborate purports. I was just going through just before the presentation began and looking at Prabhupada's purports. But here he gives a purport here and he quotes Bahonam Janmanan Ante Ganavan Man Papatte Vasudeva Samamiti Sa Mahatma Sudhulabha. So after many births, someone who actually is inspired or has an understanding that Krishna is the cause of all causes, that's a rare person. And that person cannot do anything but surrender to Krishna. So in that sense, if we are inspired to surrender to Krishna, we should hear about Krishna, hear about Krishna's opulences, hear about Krishna's pastimes and sweetness and his opulences, and then we will be inspired, and bhava, to surrender to Krishna with a feeling of love. So after many births and deaths, such a person, Prabhupada's quoting this here from 719. And then 16. Apart from all argument, logic, and negative or positive processes, when Krishna was present as the Supreme Person of Godhead at Vrindavan, no one could find limit to his potencies by studying his characteristics and activities. Now then, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu begins to recite a pastime of Lord Brahma Vimohan lila. I think most of us are familiar with this pastime. So Lord Chaitanya continues speaking about the Lord in Vrindavan, how in Vrindavan, when he appeared, he did create unlimited material and spiritual planets. And he did that in just one moment. There's two instances where, well, there's more than two, but another incident where Krishna in Vrindavan manifests his Aishwarya again to his intimate devotees was when he was accused of eating dirt. We know this pastime, and Lord Balaram tibbered on him. And then Mother Yasoda was very concerned, and she was demanding to look into Krishna's mouth. And Krishna, in a very sweet way, had his mouth tightly closed. Then she insisted, and she looked into Krishna's mouth. And as we know the past, she saw unlimited universes. All what we have described up to now, as far as the Vaikunthas and the material worlds, she saw inside Krishna's mouth. And she was astounded. She was unsure what had overcome her or what had overcome the situation. And she was had such a sense of awe and reverence for what she saw that she became mentally, you could say, disturbed. And then Krishna again manifests his sweetness as her son. But there's one example. And another example is Brahma Vimohan Lila. There we know the story. Lord Brahma was curious. Interesting, Lord Brahma's mood. Some say, sometimes he described he wanted to test Krishna. He wanted to test if this was the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Because Krishna, the Supreme Lord, who had empowered him to create all the universes, Vishnu, as the manifestation of Vishnu, then in this manifestation of this human-like, lila was too human-like for Lord Brahma. And he had, sometimes described, he had doubts, or he had curiosities. Is this the Lord of Vaikuntha? Is this my Lord? And he was specifically looking down and he was seeing Krishna sharing lunch with his cowherd boyfriends. And there's a nice description where one time, where during this, Krishna had some yogurt in his hand. And sometimes even, and he had it in his left hand, which is muchi, which normally we don't take things in the left hand, we eat with our right hand. So Krishna, in his joy of being with his cowherd boyfriends, was just playing around. And sometimes it described the cowherd boys would take a sweet ball and then Krishna would try to take it from their mouth. So this is very, very human-like, very human, so human-like that it caused a great curiosity in Lord Brahma. Is this the Lord? Is this my Lord? He's doing such one thing, you could say un-Vedic, you know, by trying to take food from his friend's mouth. And just paraphrasing the pastime until we get to this point where he exhibits his opulences. Then, as we know, Lord Brahma took away all the cowherd boys and all the cows. And Sukadeva Goswami is mentioning, he mentions that Krishna had unlimited calves and cowherd boys with him. So you couldn't count their number. It's not as if there was like 150 cowherd boys with him. That means that he is unlimited. There is no specific number. Excuse me 1 second. The glorious sun has just shone through my window. So nothing against the sun, but in order to see the screen, we'll just have to close. Hare Krishna. So no one could count how many cowherd boys there were or how many cows. And there's a number given. Having said that, it's mentioned in text 20 that each of the cowherd boys were tending calves to the extent of a Koti or ABODE, Shankha and Padma. This is the way of counting. And we won't go through the details, but if you want to look, Prabhupada in the purple describes, for example, just quote the beginning of it, tens, dasa, hundreds is sata, thousands is sahasra, tens of thousands is ayuta, and hundreds of thousands is a laksha, like that. So in other words, unlimited. And they had, of course, if there's cowherd boys, then they carry canes, they carry flutes, they all decorated flower, lotus flowers. So they cannot be, he mentions, even by writing, it's impossible. Now, what happened, as we know, that the Lord manifests as each of those cowherd boys and cows or calves. Specifically at this stage, Krishna was herding the calves, and Krishna manifest as them for a year, for a whole year. So without going right into all the details of the pastime, otherwise that will take an hour and a half. But after a year, then, as we know, Lord Brahma came back. For him, it was just a few seconds or even less, because there's different time scale in his abode. So he came back and he looked down, and what did he see? Is exactly as it was when he was gazing. He saw all the cows, all the calves, and all the cowherd boys were there, exactly as before. No change. So he became bewildered himself. That's why it's called Brahma Vimohan Lila. Lord Brahma becomes bewildered. Now the point we're getting to is, in the beginning it's mentioned that at this point, Krishna, when Lord Brahma saw, I think he came down, and then all the calves and all the cowherd boys, which are unlimited, remember, they all manifest Vaikuntha four-armed Narayan forms. And each of these millions, we could say millions, hundreds of millions of forms of Narayan, that each one of them, there was Brahmas offering prayers, different Brahmas offering prayers to each of these forms. So he was struck with wonder, as we can well imagine. And then he offers some really beautiful prayers. So you can read that. That's in the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So if anyone has any questions, you're quite welcome to ask, or anything to share, or anything that specifically inspires you, you want to reflect back. I find it good, as I mentioned in the beginning, to hear about the unlimited opulences of Krishna and kind of take shelter in our little, in our smallness, so to speak. Okay, if there's no particular questions or comments, we'll just econ.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please. I'll just adjust the slide here. Yeah.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, this is Hare Krishna Dasi from Nottingham.
Hare
Please
Krishna,
send my
Prabhu.
obeisances.
Thank you. Honored to have
Thank
you.
you, Padmanabha Prabhu, for letting me know about this session.
Yes, do you like to share something, Baba?
I wanted to ask you a question. Please,
Yes,
could you tell us more when you say that you like to take shelter in our smallness because of hearing this astonishing pastime where even Lord Brahma is kind of caught out. Could you expand on what you say when you're saying taking shelter in our insignificance, in our smallness? What do you mean?
Yeah, well, generally as conditioned souls, we generally take shelter of our false ego. Generally, a conditioned soul has an overflated estimation of ourselves, and that specifically, that's false ego, and that causes specific types of problems, because the material nature is always generally constantly showing to one degree or another that we are not in control, where the conditioned soul thinks he's in control of his life. And when it becomes evident that things are going out of control, one is thrown into lots of anxiety. And what to speak in the gross manifestation where people grossly identify with their body, or let's say subtly, persons have a false impression of who they are. And we can see the material world is full of people becoming, you could say, or being in situations where due to their other person's false ego and the three modes of material nature, they're spoken of in such a way which is different from their own perspective on them, of themselves. So they're belittled. Did you get the picture? You get so, and because of false ego, one becomes offended. Like there's a description in the Srimad Bhagavatam of Jad Bharat, you know, when he meets Maharaj Rahugana. Maharaj Rahugana employs him by force to carry his palanquin, and Jad Bharat is trying to avoid treading on ants, and so the palanquin is being carried then in a very awkward way. So Maharaj Rahugana, he becomes incensed. He's a king, and in a passionate way, he begins to kind of insult Jad Bharat. And Jad Bharat, at first, he describes that he feels it, but then because he's not in the bodily concept of life, it doesn't touch him. It has no effect on him. And he ends up giving a wonderful shiksha on Atma Tattva to Maharaj Rahugana. So that's the basic point. So the more we appreciate how great Krishna is, and the more we meditate upon our relation in that regard to Krishna as a small part and parcel, then the more we become free from the anxiety of having to maintain a false conception of who we are. And then we can be peaceful. Yeah, persons who think they're great materially, who think they got so many wonderful qualities, they are never peaceful. Just like King Kamsa was never peaceful. And also Hiranyakasipu, he had everything, but he was not peaceful because of false ego. So that's basically the inspiration there, or the force behind that. Anything on that? Or does that help kind of broaden it out more?
Yes, indeed. Particularly when you mention that what we are appreciating here in this chapter with these huge numbers of Krishna's unlimited qualities, that even he himself is astonished. Then by appreciating his greatness, then we are appreciating our smallness. We are small anyway, but in relation to appreciating Krishna's greatness, then it's interesting how you brought in the example of Jad Bharat. What was it that actually made him not lose the plot? Because he remained completely in control and humble and able to manage the situation without any embarrassment, you know, and then the king listened to him.
Yeah, so he's self-realized soul. So he didn't become entangled. He didn't shout back at the king. He just kind of took it and then explained Atma Tattva. So these things happen in one sense naturally as well. As we hear about Krishna, then in a natural way in appreciating the greatness of Krishna, in a natural way we become humble. This is the idea of hearing about Krishna. Just like Lord Brahma's become humbled because he's seen the opulence of Krishna. So now he's become humbled. And after he's become humbled, he can offer nice prayers to Krishna. When he comes to his real state of mind in relationship to Krishna, then he offers wonderful prayers to Krishna.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
Very good for adding. Yeah, thank you for that. just reading now, if you're following in the Caitanya-Cartimanrita, I'm reading from text 27. I'm just looking at the time and left. Okay. There are people who say, I know everything about Krishna. Let them think that way. As far as I'm concerned, this is Lord Brahma speaking. I do not wish to speak very much about this matter. Oh my Lord, let me say this much. As far as your opulences are concerned, they are all beyond the reach of my mind, body, and words. So I'm going to fast track a little bit, because if I try and read every verse, we definitely won't finish, as I attempt in all wonderful verses. But let's just go here. Let me do some adjusting. Yeah. So now, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, here we're trying to appreciate Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mood and his different bhavas here. Now, specifically what happens here, so he's speaking about the opulence of Krishna, and then he becomes immersed. He becomes lost in that, so to speak, and he manifests perplexity. He seemed to manage being perplexed. He wasn't perplexed in one sense, not like materially as we understand it, but he was so absorbed that it was like swimming in an ocean. Just remember, he's speaking to Sanatan, he's given Sanatan Shiksha, and then he's speaking about Krishna, speaking about the expansions of Krishna. Now he's speaking about the opulences of Krishna, and he becomes immersed in the ocean. Immersed in this ocean. They describe in text 31. And from that ecstasy in itself brought to mind a verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam. And he begins to explain it. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would often do that. He'd become absorbed, and then he would quote from Bhagavatam or other places. Then he would churn the meaning of that sloka. So he does this in regards to, this is the verse, it's from the 3rd canto. Yeah, here it is, the titles, yeah, it's in the title. For your interest, he quotes from the 3rd canto, chapter 2, text 21. The verse basically describing Krishna is the master of the 3 worlds. He is master of the 3 principal demigods. No one is greater than him. Through the potency of Swarajya Lakshmi, all his desires are fulfilled. The predominating deities of all the planets offer prayers to the Lord. So this is text 21 from the 3rd canto, 2nd chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam. So he quotes the verse, then he begins to explain the meaning. He explains it in 3 different ways. The first way is a general description. So he explains to Sanatana Goswami a general description, or in his mood of ecstasy, he's relishing it in this particular way. Again, he mentions he's the greatest of all, no one is equal to him. Then he quotes Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchit Ananda Vigraha Ananda Adi Govinda Shavakara Karanam. This is the first verse of the Brahma Samhita. Krishna is an eternal, blissful, spiritual body. He has no other origin. He is the prime cause of all causes. And then he goes on to describe the general description here. He mentions the 3 predominating deities of this material creation. This is Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and Lord Vishnu. And then they actually simply carry out the orders of Krishna. He is the master of them all. Sometimes there's a misunderstanding that Krishna comes from Vishnu. Often we kind of deal with that a lot when Hindus come to the temple. This is a common, you could say, misunderstanding that Krishna comes from Vishnu. But actually it's the other way around. Vishnu comes from Krishna, and Vishnu is carrying out the orders of Krishna. He is the master. There's one verse describes also that he makes everyone dance. He is the Supreme Lord. He makes everyone dance as they wish. And And Lord Chaitanya describes about the role of Lord Shiva, following the will of the Supreme. Lord Brahma is speaking, then he creates and Lord Shiva destroys. And in this form of Kishora Dakshai Vishnu, he maintains all the affairs of the universe. So he's the controller of the three modes of nature, or the supreme controller of the three modes of the three modes of material nature is Lord Vishnu. And again, he's carrying on with a general description. Now he gives a middle meaning. So it goes a little bit deeper, so to speak. And he's speaking on the word in the verse. The Sanskrit is Trayadisha, if I pronounce that right, which I probably haven't. Trayadisha, the three Purusha incarnations of Vishnu. And we're familiar with these. This is Mahavishnu, also known as Kaurandakshay Vishnu. He's the super soul of everything. Prabhupada gives a little purple here. Garbhadakshay Vishnu. It's from him that Lord Brahma was born to create, or was manifest. No, it was born from the lotus navel. That's also known as Hiranyagarbha. And he's a total super soul. Then we have the subtle super soul and Kishora Dakshay Vishnu in his universal form and the gross super soul. So I'm just quoting there from Prabhupada's purple. He describes how these manifestations of Vishnu, which are manifestations of Krishna, they're all shelters of the complete universe. We have this nice picture there. Might be something, I think this is probably a picture what our TOVP might look like to some degree. But nevertheless, they're all plenary portions, or portions of the plenary portions of Krishna. So just keep in mind, Lord Chaitanya is keeping this point in the forefront, that Krishna is the origin of all of these. Brahmas and other laws of the universe, of the mundane worlds, they appear from the pores of Mahavishnu and remain alive for the duration of his one exhalation. Yeah, that's so just can try and picture that. Just one, like the Brahmas and the other laws of the mundane worlds, from our perspective, that's millions and millions and millions of years. But they are, or they're manifested, or they come from when Krishna breathes out. Probably not such a good sound effect, but picture Krishna breathing out, and that's millions and millions from our perspective, millions and millions of kalpas, millions of different things. Then he breathes in, and it all becomes unmanifest. So Krishna himself is eternal. So he's continually breathing out millions of years and breathing in. We don't have time to go into the details, but just coming to mind now, there's a wonderful description of Markandeya Rishi in the 11th canto. Some of you might be aware of that, where he has this interesting curse come benediction that he can live for hundreds of kalpas. So you might think that is a good benediction to have, but actually he had to survive in the inundation of the kalpas. So he was lost in this ocean as the universes are being flooded. Anyway, to cut the story short, he sees the Lord on the lotus leaf. You might know the story, and he goes towards the Lord, and by seeing the Lord, he becomes, all his tiredness of being lost in the ocean disappears, and then the Lord opens his mouth and breathes him in, takes him in, breathes him in, and again he's lost in the ocean. Then again the Lord breathes him out, and Markandeya Rishi is in his hut where he was when he had the curiosity of the Lord's potencies. Anyway, you get the idea. So now Lord Chaitanya, he then gives, that was the middle meaning. So we had a general meaning, then we had a middle meaning, and now he gives another which he describes as a more confidential meaning. And what is that? Well, he begins to specifically speak about the Lord's personal abodes. He has his internal abode. So as we mentioned in the beginning, that's where Krishna's personal friends and associates, father and mother, live. So again, just picture Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appreciating this. Now he's beginning to speak about Krishna himself and the whirl of the lotus, Krishna's abode, Goloka Vrindavan. And he describes that this storehouse of Krishna's mercy, just this internal abode, is called Goloka Vrindavan, and described it's a storehouse of Krishna's mercy. So that's where all mercy comes from. Storehouse we know what storehouse is, isn't it? Every big company has a storehouse, and everything which the company sells comes from the storehouse. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu describes Vrindavan as a storehouse of Krishna's mercy and his sweet opulences, especially of conjugal love, his relationship with his gopi girlfriends, with the gopis. He mentions here specifically, this is where the spiritual energy, working as a maidservant, exhibits the rasa dance, the quintessence of all pastimes. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu mentions that. And I really like this description here. I'll put it at the end. The first time when I read this, I hadn't heard this description that way. It was very nice. That Vrindavan Dham is very soft due to the mercy of the Supreme Lord. So it's very sweet. Interesting description. It's very soft. And is especially opulent due to conjugal love, due to the relationship between Krishna and his devotees. That is the opulence there. So the transcendental glories of the son of Maharaj Nanda are exhibited here. I'm reading from text 45, if you're following. And then he says, under the circumstances, not the least anxiety is awakened within us. So I was interested in that, and I look, Prabhupada doesn't give a purport here, but perhaps take it as face value. Not the least anxiety is awakened within us by hearing of this, of these descriptions of Krishna. If anyone's got any comments or anything to add, please, you can do so. And now, then I'm going on. Now again, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu here, he begins again after speaking about Goloka Vrindavan, then he begins to speak about the Vaikunthas. And he speaks about the planetary system. There's this nice picture here. I'm sure you all have this picture. Some of you might have the poster. It's very well done. Gives us some idea, not a complete idea, because these subjects are inconceivable, even to the best artists, we could say. But here there's a very good kind of picture giving us some idea. Below Vrindavan planet is the spiritual sky, that's the Vaikunthas, which has unlimited Vaikuntha planets controlled by Narayan and innumerable expansions of Krishna. So the spiritual sky is full of 6 opulences. So it is the intermediate residence of Lord Krishna, reading here from text 47. It is there that an unlimited number of forms of Krishna enjoy their pastimes. So again, he's speaking about the Vaikunthas. He mentions they're like the different planets, or the different Vaikuntha planets, they're like different rooms of a treasure house. And they're filled with all opulences. So those planets there, that's where the eternal associates reside, who are also enriched with the Lord's 6 opulences. We describe those 6 opulences, comes up a few verses later. And then he describes below Goloka Vrindavan, you might be able to see it on the picture there, so the writing might be a bit small, is the place known as Devidam. or Maheshdam, and Haridam. It is 3 words: Devidam, Maheshdam, and Haridam. So they are managed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the original Lord. So between the spiritual and material world is the Viraj river. So this generated from the perspiration of the Lord, as we described, the Mahavishnu, if I got that correct, the perspiration of the Lord. An interesting name I haven't seen before is known as Vedanga. Yeah. So beyond this Viraj river is the spiritual nature, which is different than this material nature. It's eternal, inexhaustible. I think we've got that point by now. It's exhaustible, is unlimited. So this consists, I've got this little thing here, consists of 3/4 of the Lord's opulences, or 75%. So this is known as Paravyoma. So that's the spiritual sky. Sometimes it's also described that the material world is like a small cloud floating through the reality of the spiritual realm. Other times it's described as, here it's 3/4 and 1/4 is of the material realm. So the external energy, this is where we are situated, is called Devidam. And as you might have guessed, everyone here is not like the liberated souls in Vaikuntha, or all conditioned souls. So text 53 describes that it is there that the material energy Durga resides with many opulent maidservants. And Prabhupada gives a purport here. I just read from this here. Why are we here? Prabhupada describes, because we want to enjoy the material energy. So because he wants to enjoy the material energy, the conditioned soul is allowed to reside in Devidam. That's Krishna's mercy. Okay, you want to play with the toys of the material world? Here's your playground. Yeah, the external energy, where Goddess Durga, she's in charge. The material energy is called Jagal Lakshmi because she protects the bewildered conditioned souls. Reading from Prabhupada's purport, Goddess Durga is therefore known as the material mother, and Lord Shiva, her husband, is known as the material father. Goddess Durga is so named because the material world is like a big fort where the conditioned soul is placed under her care. For material facilities, the conditioned soul tries to please Goddess Durga, and Mother Durga supplies all kinds of material facilities. Okay, just quoting it from myself, but actually those are pious persons in one sense. In other words, they understand the hierarchy of the material world. They understand there are controllers, specifically Durga. So therefore they try and worship the controller of Devidam Durga and try and beseech her grace. What for? For material things. And what happens? They become more entangled by attaining those material things. So those who have no piety, they have no comprehension or no awareness of the lords of creation, so to speak. And they're just like, because they're trying to snatch at these senses or these sense objects without no regards for Dharma. They commit the word vikarmic activities. And then they become bound helplessly in the material world to suffer different miseries. Yeah, so at least those persons who are worshipping Durga, they have some sense of piety. They're appreciating, or they understand that in order to get boons, then you should pray to controller. So Prabhupada's just speaking in that way in the purport. So I'm going now, a few verses ahead I'm going. Text 56. Because, reading from text 56, because it consists of 3/4 of the Lord's energy, the spiritual world is called Tripad Buddha. being a manifestation of 1/4 of the Lord's energy. The material world is called Ekapada. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is describing about the material world at this point. And he's concluding that actually it's difficult to ascertain the number of universes, the material universes. And again, he speaks pastime. We'll just paraphrase this pastime. It's a very nice pastime. I'm sure the brothers are familiar with it. Lord Brahma is humbled yet again. This is a nice pastime where when the Lord was residing at Dwarka, Lord Brahma came, and when, of course, the doorkeeper met Lord Brahma, and he went to inform Krishna, and Krishna said, which Brahma is he? What is his name? So the doorman went back to the door, because Lord Brahma wasn't allowed in at that point. And he asked Lord Brahma, who are you? Which Brahma? So Lord Brahma was taken aback. He was surprised, because from his comprehension, his perspective, there is nothing outside of the universe that he created. No other universe exists. That was his comprehension. So when he was asked the question, which Lord Brahma are you? He was taken aback, and he was surprised. So he said, well, I'm the four-headed Lord Brahma. I'm the father of the Kumaras. I'm the creator of the whole universe. So the doorman then informed Krishna, and then he was given permission to enter. And Lord Brahma comes, he offers obeisances, and he worships the Lord. And the Lord honored him as well with suitable words. And then the Lord asked, why have you come? And Lord Brahma had a mission. He had a reason for coming, but that wasn't now in the forefront of his mind. For first, he had a doubt, and he asked Krishna, why did you ask me which Lord Brahma came to see you? What is the purpose? I mean, I'm the only Lord Brahma. I mean, I'm the creator of the universe. So when he heard this, Krishna smiled and immediately meditated. And as he meditated, he invoked or called the presence of unlimited Brahmas came. Now, interesting, the description of these Brahmas, you see the picture here. Again, the artist has tried to has painted to a very, it's a very nice picture. But some had 10 heads, some 20, some 100, some 1,000, some 10,000, some 100,000, some 10 million, and others 100 million. So this is not just a poetic description. This is actual factual, 100 million. So if you can ask the question of how 100 million heads fit on one torso, I cannot answer that question. It's intriguing, but that's how it's described, 100 million heads or 10 million heads. And also different, many Lord Shivas came, and they had various heads as well, numbering 1,000 and 10 million. And many Indras had arrived. He had hundreds of, describes it, eyes all over his body, the unlimited Indras. So interesting in this specific pastime that none of the Brahmas could see the other Lord Brahma. As far as they were concerned, they was just called into the presence of Krishna, and no other Brahmas were present. But the Brahma who originally came, he could see all the Brahmas. But the specific Brahmas who came on the Lord's request, they could only see themselves there with Krishna in Dwarka. So the pastime basically unfolds. At one point, all the Brahmas, they paid obeisances to Krishna and all the Shivas, and the sound was tumultuous. Describes that there was all offering prayers, and the sound of all the prayers and the bowing down of all these millions of Brahmas with millions of heads was basically Lord Brahma became humble. That's why the title of this slide is Lord Brahma is humbled. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is reciting that pastime there. So Krishna describes to Lord Brahma, why does Lord Brahma have 4 heads? Because it's the smallest. Krishna said, your particular universe has a diameter of 4 billion miles. So that's pretty inconceivable to us. But for Lord Brahma, it's 4 billion. So therefore, it's the smallest of the universes. Consequently, you have only 4 heads. So anything to add there? Any comments, please do, or any questions or inspirations? Yeah, so some of the universes are 1 billion yojanas, some 1 trillion, some 10 trillion. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu goes on to describe, just going forward a few verses.
One question.
Yes, please.
In the chat from Jay.
Yeah.
He was asking, what is the difference between a spiritual planet and a material planet? And he also wanted to know similarly the difference between a material body and a spiritual body.
Well, there's a big difference. Material planet is temporary. The spiritual planets are eternal, and they are not subject to time. The material body is temporary, as I'm sure we've all noticed. There's birth, growth, old age, disease, and death. But the spiritual body, it is eternal. It is not subject to the element of time. Here in this material world, the potency which mixes and moves matter is called time. And that Krishna has as a potency, and he employs it in the material realm for specific purpose. So he is not subject to that. So the Vaikunthas are not subject to that phenomena. And actually speaking, if we take it deeper, then we, the soul, we are also eternal. We are the observers of the temporary manifestation of our body. Therefore, we observe as a secondary person. I am sick, I am this, I am that. But we exist actually on the same platform of eternity. But we are not in tune with that because we misidentify ourselves with this gross and subtle body. So basically the answer is that the difference is Vaikuntha is eternal, material worlds are temporary. There's other differences, as I think we've hinted on. This material world is full of kleshas, adibautic, adidevic, and adhyatmic, full of miseries because the jivas are trying to lord it over what doesn't belong to them. But in the Vaikuntha planets, everyone's happily serving the Lord in their original constitutional position as his loving servants. So basically, I hope that answers the question. If anything on that, you could please, I hope that's okay.
And we had just a comment as also from Caitanya Jivan Prabhu, and he was just asking, I understand it that the Brahmas have so many heads, but they don't all manifest at once.
Oh, okay, okay. Great, that helps me understand it a bit more. It must be a bit awkward walking around with 10 billion heads on your torso. Yeah, thank you. That Chaitanya Jivan Prabhu, yeah, thank you. Yeah, interesting. So yeah, for specific purpose, then only a certain amount of heads are manifested. Okay, that's that kind of a bit more easy to comprehend. Okay, if there's any, I hope everyone's interested so far and finding enlivening to hear about. It's nice to spend afternoon. We should spend a whole day, but part of the day in just hearing and chanting about Krishna. It's what we should do this every day, spend time absorbed in Krishna and the philosophy and the pastimes of Krishna. Like So let's go on, shall we? I presume it's okay to go on. And Lord Chaitanya is going to speak more on the word Chayi Adishvara, which indicates that Krishna, so this is the more confidential meaning he's expanding on. He went back to explain about the opulences of Vaikuntha in relationship to the material worlds. We heard them. Now he's speaking, Lord Chaitanya speaks about Krishna possessing free lokas or free natures. So again, a more confidential meaning. These three places are Goloka. You see, that's the picture, or at least on my left. We know that one, Krishna, cowherd boy, and Mathura. Done my best to find a picture of Mathura, so the artist might have had in mind Dwarka, but then we have below we have Dwarka. So Krishna resides in these three places. And Prabhupada quotes Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He comments that in the Goloka planet, there are three divisions, Goloka, Mathura, and Dwarka. Then he mentions, Bhaktisiddhanta mentions that in his incarnation as Gaura Sundara, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Lord conducts his pastimes in three areas also. That's Navadvip, Jagannath Puri. Interesting, let me read this again. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Lord conducts his pastimes in three areas, Navadvip, Jagannath Puri, and Vraj Mandala. Yeah, Navadvip, Jagannath Puri, and Vraj Mandala. So these three places, now we've been discussing the Vaikunthas, now we're discussing a little bit about these impersonal abodes of the Lord, where he resides personally, so to speak. These are full of the Lord's internal potencies. And Krishna, reading from text 92, he is the proprietor, he is the sole proprietor. And as text Lord Chaitanya describes as previously mentioned, the jewels on the helmets of all predominating deities of all the universes and Vaikuntha planets touch the throne and lotus feet of the Lord when those deities offered obeisances. When the gems on the helmets of the predominating deities collided before the throne and the Lord's feet, there was a jingling sound which seemed like the prayers offered by the helmets and Krishna's lotus feet. Just reading here, Krishna is thus situated eternally in his spiritual potency, and the opulences of that spiritual potency is called Sat Aishvarya, indicating 6 kinds of opulences. So these opulences, these spiritual potencies, they fulfill all the desires of Krishna, all his desires as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So then Lord Chaitanya describes, we have this picture of an ocean. This is Krishna's potencies are unlimited. It's just like an ocean. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is beginning to, he's beginning to taste it, but he concludes, I haven't touched one drop of it. It's so vast. The potencies and the qualities of Krishna are so vast. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in a great ecstasy of appreciation, he concludes, I haven't touched one part of it. So he's becoming enlivened in that way. At this point, they described that Lord Chaitanya, at this point, when he's describing the opulences and spiritual potencies of Krishna in this way, there's an awakening of love within him, or we could say a churning of love within the Lord. And his mind becomes immersed, it goes in a different direction now. So he's been describing the Devi Dham, now then he described the Lord's personal abode, then he's more describing Krishna, and as he's describing this, he becomes immersed in the loving dealings of Krishna in the spiritual world. And he becomes enlivened by that. So I'll just read here from text 100. To exhibit the strength of his own spiritual potency, Lord Krishna manifests a form just suitable for his pastimes in the material world. This form was wonderful even for him, and was the supreme abode of the wealth of good fortune. Its limbs were so beautiful that they increased the beauty of the ornaments worn on the different parts of the body. So we know Krishna came down to Brahma Vrindavan. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was appreciating that. Took on this beautiful, this wonderful form, Nala Lila, for pastimes in the material world. Then there's this nice description of Bhushana, Bhushana Angam. If you look at the verse, Bhushana, Bhushana Angam. So normally persons put ornaments upon their body in order to enhance their body, so to speak. But actually what happens with Krishna, the ornaments which are upon the Lord, they become glorified. It actually, let me just, the Bhushana, they are the ornaments themselves, they become glorified by being on Krishna. I have this experience as well as a Pujari. I'm often blessed to dress Radha Landanishvara. We have many outfits. We keep about 80. We've got 80 outfits, and some of them outfits I really like, and sometimes, because I don't choose the outfits, it's chosen by the devotees who make the garlands. And then sometimes there's an outfit which may not be to my, it's this outfit, so to speak. It's not one of my favorites. But every time, once I put it on the Lord, I think, wow, what a beautiful outfit that is. Actually, I was wrong. This is a very nice outfit. Actually, this is perhaps one of my favorite outfits. That's because once it goes on the Lord, it looks beautiful. It looks perfect. It looks wonderful. So similarly with the ornaments. So Krishna's Bhushana, Bhushana Angam. You put ornaments on him and the ornaments become glorified. And then Lord Chaitanya describes that Lord has many pastimes, which his pastimes as a human being are the best. In this form, he is a cowherd boy. He carries a flute in his hand, and his youth is new. He is also an expert dancer. All this is just suitable for his pastimes as a human being. So at this point, the time is 3:23. We have another class tomorrow. So if there's any, perhaps I might stop here. I just invite if there's any questions or comments, or any, you've had some kind of, or perhaps you can just feedback if there's something which struck you, which you think, yes, that was very interesting. You could just share. Because I think we'll probably stop here and we'll continue tomorrow. So I just say, if there's anyone out there, if someone asks you, what do you remember from this class that you heard today? What would you say? What was it that's something which struck you? You can share. Anyone out there? Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. Rob. Who's speaking?
Sharada here, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Baba Sharada. Hare Krishna. Thank you for joining us. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes, you wanted to share something? Oh.
I like your class. Thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
I'm little confused about the Hari Dham and Devi Dham. Can you just say a little bit on that? Can you elaborate?
Yeah, let me go back to the slide. Hari Dham and Devi Dham.
Yeah.
There was a purport there from Prabhupada. Anyone can give us, anyone knows the distinction here between Haridam and Devi Dham? I don't want to speculate. I'm trying to look for where it was, where it is.
Well, I think Devi Dham is the material world, if I understand, and Haridam is the spiritual world. Vaikuntha.
Yeah. When the living entity is liberated from Devi Dham, so that's the material world. So, but interesting, I'm trying, because I want to look, because Haridam, that's the place of Lord Brahma. It's not actually the spiritual realm. That's why I wanted to double confirm that. I'm just reading here. Because so that specific description, we have Devi Dham, then we have the place where Lord Brahma resides, the predominators of the material worlds. Therefore, although the Mahesh Dham is Lord Shiva's Dham, and above Devi Dham, it is not the spiritual world. Actually, I'm mistaken. The spiritual world begins with Haridam. No, that's correct. So, yes, that's the correct understanding. Haridam is also another name for Vaikuntha. Okay, Devi Dham is a place of Devi Durga. Yeah, that's correct. So, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that question. When I read that the first time, I took note of that mentally. Okay, let's have a clear understanding of that. Yeah, thank you for that question. I hope that's clear. Yeah. Anything else from anyone out there?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, it's
Yeah.
Dave from Warsaw. Just going back to the question I asked, you said everything in the spiritual sphere is eternal, but spiritual planets and spiritual bodies made out of matter too?
No, spiritual bodies, they have a different composition. We are, our body is made of bhumi, apo, nalo, vayo, kama, mano, buddha, evacha, hankara, itayana, and hankara. We live in the earthly realms, therefore the constitution of our body is predominantly earth, water, fire, air, at least the gross body that the soul is possessed of, so to speak, that the soul resides in, that's a gross body, and it's subject to the influence of time, as we described. Now, the spiritual bodies, they have a different constitution, but they are bodies and they are forms. Like you see pictures of Krishna, his pastimes in the spiritual world. They are forms. There's eyes, there's legs, there's arms like that. But it's not like our arms, our eyes, etc. In other words, it's a spiritual body. It's made of spirit. So therefore, obviously, there's no decay there because it's a spiritual body. It's eternal. Here in this world, this is a counterfeit of that original place. So this body is a counterfeit of our original body. Just like if you have a glove, the glove on the hand takes the same shape as the hand, obviously. So similarly, the gross manifestation of the material body is a reflection of our spiritual body. So here in the material world, then we are subject to the frailties of being in a temporary body. So again, it comes to a point where we have to, in one sense, we have to accept that some things are inconceivable to us. We're trying to describe something which is beyond our dimension of understanding. But at least we can try and appreciate it to some degree. In other words, in the spiritual world, no one has lungs like we do. No one has veins like here. And in a spiritual world, there is no such thing as cancer hospitals. I mean, where the ashram where I stay, I'm surrounded by hospitals. There is no hospitals in the spiritual world. Sorry, there is no cremations. There's no funerals. That is just not part of the spiritual realm because there's no death. They're not subject to time. So that's as far as we can probably comprehend. We give some examples there, but just keep in mind that this is a counterfeit. So this is a shadow. So if there's a counterfeit, there must be an original. Just like we use in our Pujari department, I'm a Pujari, then we use saffron. But there's imitation saffron and there's real saffron. Yeah. So often, sometimes we get imitation saffron. So that imitation saffron indicates there must be real saffron. And so in the same way, this abode here, this place, indicates there is a real place. If you think about it, Krishna, just gone over half past, so just finish on this point. Krishna is perfect. God is perfect. So there must be a perfect place, and that's the spiritual world. This place is made perfectly to be imperfect by Krishna. That's another subject. But because here things go wrong, things run out. I'm sure we noticed that. Things run out, the battery runs out, things go wrong and things decay. But not in the spiritual world. There is no decay. Everything works harmoniously, influenced by the internal energy. So I hope that kind of gives some idea, anyway, as best as we can. But thank you for your question, Jay, your inquiry. Does that help to understand a bit more?
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Okay.
What's the difference between spiritual planets and material planets? Are they, again, are the spiritual planets made out of matter?
No, they're made out of spirit. That's why they're called spiritual planets.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, material was made of matter.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I thank you for joining us. So please join us tomorrow at the same time, unless I'm mistaken. It's the same time from 2 to 3:30. And I'm just looking at this, what we've got to cover. I'm quite confident. Hopefully, we can finish. But thank you, everyone, for joining in, and I wish you a happy rest of the day. And I look forward to hearing and seeing you all tomorrow at 2 p.m.
Hare
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dhanyawada.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, bro. Hare Krishna.
Advi, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. I got to comment, but I'll do it next tomorrow.
Okay, yeah. Please save it. Please note it down.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Hare Krishna, man.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Okay, Padma and Nityana, you're welcome to finish if you want.
Okay, thank you, Prabhu. Thank you for the class. See you tomorrow.
Yes, Hare Krishna.
Haribo.
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 Haribo, Hare Krishna.
Krishna.